Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to what is officially, never say never, the final meeting of the San Rafael General Plan 2040 Steering Committee in its most officious capacity. So this is our 25th meeting. Congratulations, truly. And thank you. And I know you'll hear from staff also, but thank you for your efforts and participation and attentiveness and for showing up, truly. I mean, it's one thing to show up for 2.5 years in person, and it's a whole other ball of wax when it becomes virtual, when I know that everyone has competing challenges, frankly. Not that we don't all bring challenges, but during a pandemic that like nothing we've ever seen. It's a unique thing that we're all gathering, and I think it says a lot about how we feel about our commitments and about our town. So thank you. I want you to think ahead a little to the later in the agenda, because I'm going to look forward to hearing from each of you, and I do mean each of you. That's all 24, with your positive impressions about the process and the work we've done. That'll be later in the agenda. And with that, I think I'll turn it to Barry for the roll and the meeting protocol.
Great, thank you, and welcome everybody. I wanted to begin tonight with an overview of our meeting protocol and description of the agenda, kind of the nuts and bolts of how this meeting works. I think most of you were on the May meeting call, and it's similar to that. We don't have Opticos doing a presentation. You get me serving as both your presenter and your meeting administrator, so we'll see how I do with multitasking here. So we'll take roll call in just a moment and have the approval of the April minutes. We then have a presentation on on the project status, followed by a short committee discussion. Following that item, we're going to walk you through the highlights of what's new in goals, policies, and programs for General Plan 2040. We're going to do that in 2 parts, similar to what we did with the downtown plan. There we had 3 parts. In this case, we're going to go through the first set of policies, have some Q&A, and then the second set of policies and have some Q&A. And obviously, it's a very big document. We're not going to tackle the whole thing. I think what we really wanted to do is, first of all, if any of you have immediate questions or reactions to anything you've seen that's popped out of you so far, to hear from you and field questions or comments. And then we're highlighting some of the things that we think are important and merit some discussion before we break. We also have time later in the meeting for some parting comments, as the chair mentioned. And when we come to the conclusion of that item, we will read into the record any questions or comments that have been entered by the public. We do have attendees at this meeting that are not visible on the screen, but that are able to watch the proceedings of this meeting. A couple of ground rules. The meeting is being recorded. Please keep that in mind. We will be uploading the audio file to our project website after the meeting is concluded. We ask that you keep your microphones on mute during the meeting to improve the audio quality and reduce background noise. Obviously, when we're doing roll call, approving minutes, and when you're called on, you'll need to unmute your microphone. For those unfamiliar with where the mute button is located, it's at the bottom left of your screen. And most of you, I think, have already done these kinds of meetings before, so you know that. We're also asking that you use the raise hand button, which is also, that's in the participants window on your screen. And if you're wanting to make a comment or speak, given the large number of people that are at the meeting, that you use the raise hand button, and the chair will recognize you. Maybe not in order, because I think we're not really able to see the sequence of when you raised your hand, but we will try to give everybody a chance to ask a question or make a comment. For the public, we have an opportunity to submit written comments via a Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. You can enter comments in the Q&A box. I see now one of our attendees is a panelist. Hang on just one second. Sorry,
I think Kate Powers has a comment also.
Kate, maybe you can ask your comment while I am upgrading Margaret to panelist.
It's Margaret. I
Oh.
got a text. She needs to get in and she's having trouble.
Okay,
Thank you.
She is now joining us. So,
Thank you.
Welcome.
okay, great. And I'm just looking at who else is there. Okay, we're good. So, with that said, we are looking at about a 2-hour meeting this evening. We invite you to turn your cameras on because we'd like to see you and we'd like you to see us. We're all kind of, I think, you know, it's a little more real when we can see who's in front of us. So please do be visible during the meeting, but again, with the mic on mute. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our chair, and then I think she's going to turn it right back to me for roll call.
Except to say that I wish I was sitting in a lazy boy like Rafi, but you know, we can't all be so lucky. Why don't we go ahead and take roll?
Great. Okay. DJ Allison.
Here.
Don Blaney. I don't see Don on the call yet. Jenny Broering.
Here.
Mary Beth Bushy.
Here.
Bill Carney.
Here.
Omar Carrera. Is Omar here? Looks like Omar is not yet here. Berenice Davidson.
Here.
Richard Hall.
Here.
Okay. Eric Holm.
Here.
Eleanor Wang.
Here.
Linda Jackson.
Here.
Margaret Johnston.
Here.
Jeff Jones.
Here.
Bonnie Marmer.
Here.
Bob Miller.
Here.
Drew Norton. Stephanie Plant.
Here.
Okay. Kate Powers.
Here.
Jeff Rhodes.
Here.
Jackie Schmidt.
Here.
Roger Smith.
Here.
Sparky Spaeth.
Here.
Karen Strolia.
Here.
And Cecilia Zamora.
Here.
Okay. And okay, Don Blaney is also here. Don, are you, he just sent me an email saying he's here. Don, can you hear us? He may be participating by phone. We will try and, okay. We're going to count Don as here, although I don't see him on the screen. We'll see if we can figure this out during the discussion. So with that, I will turn it back to the chair. Thank you. It's 22 present.
Doesn't work when your legal pad's sitting on top of the mouse and you can't turn on your microphone. Thank you. 22 present. With that, you have before you two packets of minutes. In April, as you might recall, we met 4 different times in small groups to cover different elements of the plan. And in May, we had our presentation that Barry was just discussing with Opticos presenting a draft of the downtown precise plan. If there are any corrections that you see in any of those meeting minutes that you attended, now would be the time. If you were not present, it is also okay to say yes when we vote to accept the minutes. There's no need to abstain because we will know for which meetings you're voting yes for. We're not going to do them one at a time. So Barry has been taking excellent role throughout. So we're just going to do one global acceptance of all of these minutes. Unless at this time anyone had a correction to anything that they read. Okay, I don't see a hand. I think that's silence. With that, I would move that we vote to approve both the meeting summaries from April, of which there were 4, and the May minutes from the meeting on May 13th.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 And I assume we have no opposed. Thank you. With that, we have a presentation of our next steps, which will then lead us into a discussion of the beginnings of that full draft of the general plan. So Barry and I are just playing tennis here. We're going to go back to Barry now.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm going to share my screen, provide this presentation, and then we have some time for Q&A after that. Okay. Can everybody see my screen in front of them?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
I hope the answer is yes, because if it's no, then I don't know what to do. So we're gonna trust the technology. Okay, so this is basically a status report on where we go from here. Before we do where we go from here, I wanted to I wanted to run through where we've been. So this is a slide that takes us back to our bylaws and speaks to what this committee was created to do, which is, I believe, a little bit different than what the steering committee for the General Plan 2020 did. The intent of this committee has been to be a sounding board for policies, actions, and priorities. I just copied the list of what the expectations were for committee members from the bylaws and included them on the slide without reading through all of them. I think the key here is that you guys have been tremendous as a sounding board for policies, actions, and priorities, and we're not done yet. So just so you know, although this may be the last formal meeting of all 24 of us, we're not letting you go just yet, and we intend to continue to communicate with you and meet with you in groups to continue our discussion. So as the chair said, we've had 25 meetings over 30 months. We have been on a bus tour. We've had a charrette. We've done small groups. We've done panel discussions. We've had Zoom meetings, which we never in our wildest dreams imagined we would have, and find ourselves now 2.5 years later with a set of draft policies, goals, policies, and programs for consideration. Just again to recap the flow of how this all has gone, we started with kind of an overview of what the general plan was all about, our issues and challenges as a city. During summer 2018, we spent a lot of time developing guiding principles, and then moved into the land use map and the land use categories. In late 2018 and through the beginning of 2019, we went through a series of audits of General Plan 2020 element by element and asked for your feedback and provided our own thoughts on each element. And then faced the task of taking your feedback and crafting new policies that tried to balance many different viewpoints and perspectives on the issues we were dealing with. At the same time, we were integrating new topic areas like sea level rise and equity that are on the front burner today as we think about the future. From that, we moved into the development of policies for each element of the general plan, presented those in late 2019 and early 2020, and received your feedback on the working draft policies and attempted again to synthesize your input, which I will keep saying this is it's not a consensus process in many cases. We always strive for consensus, but there are many different viewpoints and perspectives, and we did our best to try and capture those in the work product. At the same time, just you all know that you were double tasked with the input on the Downtown Precise Plan. You are the official steering committee for that process as well, and we intend to keep working with you as that process moves towards its completion also. A shout out to our Gold Star attendees. Bill, Bonnie, Kate, and Jackie did not miss a single meeting. You were at all 25, including our virtual subcommittee meetings. So thank you, Linda and Jeff. Only missed one meeting, and again, you guys get extra credit for being there and showing up, and we appreciate that. So what I wanted to do now is briefly turn to the next steps for these 4 items: General Plan 2040, the Precise Plan, and the EIR, and then just talk a little bit about the adoption process. So I mentioned that we're not done yet. We at the staff level are now drafting the narrative text that goes with each element. We're wrapping up work on the neighborhoods element, and that's being reviewed internally. We are mostly finished with the maps and figures for the general plan, but again, those are mostly in progress and have not been completely proofed or edited or corrected. And then there's an implementation chapter, and I have a slide about that in the second presentation. We do want to encourage steering committee comment on the draft policies. One point that I want to emphasize, and this relates to a letter that was submitted today from Shirley Fisher and a second letter from Petra Plus, and this relates to the level of service standards. Just to emphasize, were we to do it again, we would not have included that policy M2.5 in this document. That is a placeholder that has been in the document since December. We are going to revise the level of service policy based both on the input we've been getting from the community and also a meeting that we have scheduled with the council. It was originally supposed to be actually next Monday, but is now going to happen on July 6th. So we're working on a staff report and recommendations for July 6th that will address the issue of how level of service will be handled in the new general plan. Just wanted to make that, put that out there right away. We are still working toward a draft target completion date at the end of July, and are also working to update the traffic mitigation fee as part of this process. Moving on to the Downtown Precise Plan, the administrative draft was completed in May. You had a presentation on that document on May 13th. We're going to ask a few of you to assist us as we review that administrative draft and then work with our consultants, Opticos Design, to revise that based on our collective comments. And we expect to have additional input from the downtown business community and the preservation community and others during this process, again, working toward completion of that draft in roughly 2 months. The EIR is in progress. The project description has been completed. The EIR, as you may be familiar with these documents, a lot of the content is the settings section, which describes existing conditions. That's all been completed. The forecasts for 2040 for traffic, noise, air quality, and greenhouse gases have been completed, and the consultant is now drafting the impact and mitigation measures for those for that document and is submitting that in batches for staff review. Once we receive a complete public review draft, the intent is to release all 3 of these documents concurrently. That begins a 45-day formal review process for the EIR, which includes circulation to different state and local agencies, as well as public comment. The discussions of these documents will occur concurrently in the second half of this year with briefings to boards and commissions, neighborhood groups, and so on. Our hope is to have planning commission and council hearings at the end of 2020. And that concludes the overview, and I'm happy to take questions or comments at this time, and I will stop the screen share with that. Okay. Also, I wanted to just respond to Bonnie's question about the deadline for committee comments. We would really like your comments by the end of June, if it is at all possible. Knowing it's a big document, we'll take them if they're a little bit later than that, but for maximum effectiveness, it would be great to get them by the end of June. And keeping in mind, this will continue to be a public review, editable document until it's adopted. So you can submit your comments in November, but the sooner the better is always the answer. And I'll turn it back over to our chair.
Oh, I had another.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
I have one more question. I was going to type it in, but if I can just ask. With regard to the experts with the forecast for greenhouse gases, et cetera, has there been time for them to incorporate any kind of forecast that take into consideration the new normal, or are these things that kind of all were calculated before, say, March of this year?
The calculations for greenhouse gases may just qualitatively mention that during the last 3 months, we've seen a big decrease because of the current situation, but they're not, the models still presume, well, I don't want to say business as usual, but we're not redoing the model based on the effects of the pandemic. I think we're looking 20 years out, and you know, the general presumption is that there will be some return to what we would call the old normal during that time period.
Jeff.
Will there be some sort of timeline for the various different components of the general plan, the EIR and whatnot, and expectations for comment that we can refer to? There's a lot of moving parts. It'd be kind of nice to know when to expect stuff to come out and when to schedule comment.
Yeah, I think the idea is that you will see, well, with the downtown plan, we have a very intentional approach that we're setting up to get feedback on that document. Less so with the general plan, because most of the information that is yet to be provided is already, if it's not in the policies, it's online in the background reports. So the background reports that are on SanRafael2040.org have a lot of that context information, existing conditions, if you will, and you're welcome to review and comment on that. But we're not envisioning two separate drafts before we, you know, another complete draft for steering committee comment before we get to public review of that document.
Roger, I see a virtual hand up. Is that an active hand?
Roger has his hand up.
Yes, I see it.
That's my hand up. I'm trying to
Great.
be
I got it.
technologically with it here.
You're with it.
I guess Barry, motivate me to make any comments. I mean, it's 140 pages. We'll never have a chance to discuss, you know, our respective comments. And, you know, it would be a huge amount of work to go through this document and comment on it. You know, I've already looked at certain things that are of particular interest to me personally, but it's really, but going through this and giving any kind of feedback seems like it could be a huge amount of time for me and a lot of effort for individuals here, but not very valuable in terms of what the outcome would be.
I guess I would say to review the sections, what you mentioned, there are sections that are of greatest interest to you, but also the sections where you provided specific comments to make sure that we captured your input correctly. And in your case, Roger, I mean, you did provide a lot of input to us, and we incorporated a lot of your input. So I would look to you and say, did we get it right? You know, on those topics where you, you know, provided a lot of thoughts and feedback, we would love to hear anything you have, you know, specific to that topic area.
I see a couple things. I see two hands, both Margaret and Jackie, and then there's a comment. So Omar and Don are in the public room.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if there's a way to move them in or if they actually have to.
I can do it.
You can do it. Okay. So in answer to the question, Kate, in the chat, yes, Barry's going to move them. So Jackie, I think you were one of my two questions, and then Margaret.
Well, wait till Barry's done because it's a question for Barry.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out if Don is in the, sorry, this is a logistical issue. In the attendees room, I don't see him by name, but I see a phone number and it ends in 9272. And I don't, if that's Don, then I will happily upgrade him, but I don't know if that's Don. So maybe he can text or message somebody and let me know if he is 9272, in which case I'll do that. And Jackie, you can go ahead.
Okay, I'm just, is it not the case that we've had, I mean, I know we've had the opportunity already to comment on previous drafts of almost everything that's in the current new draft. And I really, so it's not like this is new stuff to comment on, you know, it's suddenly brand new. And I would encourage everyone to look at the document you sent, which shows the changes that you put in there after committee comments, because that's where you can find the paragraph you may or may not have commented on, and you can see if something was changed or not. And that was really helpful for me. But I'm not planning on going through the entire document all over again, because I think I've already been through it twice.
Thank you. Yes. Linda, can I get to the list, or was that directly related to Jackie? I have 2 or 3 people with their hand up waiting. Okay, thanks. Margaret?
Yeah, well, one section we haven't.
And I saw you, Roger.
Yeah.
Sorry, Margaret.
Yeah, one section we haven't seen and had the opportunity to comment on yet is the neighborhoods element. And, you know, I was interested, and I was hoping maybe there'd be other people from the North San Rafael area that are interested in sort of jointly having a chance to review and discuss the North San Rafael portion of the neighborhoods element. And I guess the response I got from you, Barry, when I suggested that was, we all individually have the chance to comment on it. And that isn't a very satisfactory answer to me. I think some group discussion would be very useful. And I think Richard and Kate and anybody else who's particularly interested in North San Rafael, as well as anybody, members of the community that have been giving input, should have a chance to have sort of like a subcommittee review and meeting to discuss that neighborhood element. And if it's just something that doesn't fit into the staff's work schedule, I'd be happy to arrange it. So I'm just throwing that out there. I think that would be useful. And
yeah, and I'll respond by saying Paul and I have talked about this. Paul and Rafi and I have talked about this, and we do think that a follow-up conversation with interested members of this committee to go through the neighborhoods element is workable. So we'll work with you on that. The hesitation is that we had set up a protocol for that element where we were working directly with HOAs and neighborhood organizations who have submitted quite detailed input on that, and I've been working to incorporate that, and we're intending to work with them. So we'll be definitely having some follow-up conversation with a group of committee members on this.
okay.
My hesitation was mixing the two together, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it would be nice if we could see the comments of all of those groups.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, there may be some conflicts between what some of us are saying and what some of those groups are saying. It'd be nice to sort of see what the consensus seems to be, and consider different comments. We may not all be in agreement, there may not be a complete consensus, but I think the way you get towards a consensus and general support is by having a discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, and then it looks like we have Roger and Linda.
My question is actually more, it's hardware. I would like to get a copy of, I can't print out 140 pages. And I would like a copy of the red line version if I'm going to try and comment. I can't do this on a computer screen. Is that possible to have one printed?
Yes. I mean, we didn't want to send copies of the printed version to everybody. I think we've stuck with our protocol of keeping this paperless to the extent that we could, but if you would like to have a paper copy, we can make that available to you.
Cecilia is asking if we could name the document we're discussing. I assume we're discussing the red line. Barry, why don't you go ahead and clarify that for her?
It's attachment 3B to the agenda packet, which is named the Compendium of Policies for General Plan 2040. I have my copy around here somewhere. Oh. Policy Compendium.
Great, thank you. And then, sorry to keep you waiting, Linda.
No problem. Thank you, Roger, for bringing that up, because I, spend all day on the screen, and the last thing I want to do is spend my spare time on the screen. And so what I would love to have, and I'll just make this request now, but when the maps are available and the draft plan comes out, so we have the whole, because right now we have not seen, we've seen a couple of maps on the screen for a second or two. So those maps are important to know as well. I'd love to have a copy of that draft plan when it goes to the Planning Commission, so I can look at the whole and see it three-dimensionally rather than one screen at a time. I would also like to see if there's any, in that list of changes that are made, a recognition that there may be changes to maps as well. And so if a map was substantially revised, that there's some recognition of that, not a list of all the changes, but, minor corrections versus, brand new map.
Right.
Scale of things, so that we know when we're looking at the maps, whether they're just a carryover and an update or whether they are something new. So that would be my request. And I guess I'd be submitting that request to you or Paul this time, but when it's ready for as a whole.
And if I could just announce that anybody who would like a paper copy of the policies, please do email me, and we can have one available. We may ask you to pick it up, but we'll make it as easy as possible for you to do that.
Okay, I have one more hand. Kate.
I had a question about the map since we're talking about them now. I also would like to see the map of the creeks and the channels and waterways and how they're represented, where they're placed in the document, et cetera. And the other thing that I would really like, I thought I mentioned this before, but I might not have, is I think it would be really valuable to have a map of the public realm, of the streets and public squares and parks and water, the creeks. I think it would be really interesting to see that connected tissue of the city, of where the public connects and has public access to. So I just wanted to put that out there before we're too close to being done. Thank you.
Thank you all. So with that, I think we should move on to the presentation and discussion of these items that we're talking about having virtually or on paper.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to move straight into the shared screen again. I just wanted to let Don Blaney know that because he is on his phone, I'm not able to upgrade him to a panelist. Unfortunately, that I don't see the capacity to put a phone participant on unless we just keep him on audio the whole time. I may come back to that, but just wanted to let him know we're working on it.
Okay.
Okay, so ready to move into the next module. Again, a recap of our process, how the policies were developed, starting with guiding principles, going through the policy audit, developing new policies from the comments on the audit, then revising those policies based on your input to get to the draft. We've talked about these two documents already. They are a tracked change policy summary. One thing I wanted to point out about this is that the base document on which the changes are tracked is not General Plan 2020. It is the first draft set of policies that we provided to you, mostly at the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020. So it's changes to what was originally, to what was proposed initially. In some cases, the edit that you see as a track change is actually restoring language that was in General Plan 2020. So if you read a policy and said, we like the old policy better, and we put it back, it would show up as a track change because we're tracking the draft new policies. I know that's a little confusing. Okay, this says what I was just talking about. And I also wanted to point out that we have added a number of policies and programs addressing public health emergencies and responding to the impacts of the pandemic. Some of these are, we tried not to include policies and programs that may become dated in 3 months or 4 months as things evolve. These are, I think, longer term, bigger picture issues about things like the design of public transit systems, the design of public space that are going to be with us for a while, and that they may indeed change the rules of the game for planning policy. So we've focused on those issues, but we've also added language to talk about pandemic health emergencies in things like our local hazard mitigation plan and our emergency preparedness planning. Even if it's mentioned in current plans and documents, it's really not mentioned in any way that, you know, that reflects where we are today. So the second document is the compendium of policies with the guiding principles. It's the clean version of the goals, policies, and programs. We did include the housing element in the document, although we haven't changed the housing element as part of this, except where necessary for internal consistency. And so there are no substantive changes to the housing element. That's going to happen when the document is updated in accordance with state law, which is next year and in 2022. And we've mentioned previously the elements of the components of the plan that are still missing that we're working on. And we will do whatever we can to work with the committee as these are finalized. So it was interesting to come back to this diagram now 2 years later. We actually developed this in May 2018. There was a first version that was narrative text that we then moved to a graphic. Spent, I think, 3 meetings of the steering committee talking about this diagram and, you know, kind of having a fresh look at it now 2 years later and thinking about whether it still reflects our reality. My thought is that it's still current, and if anybody has comments on this, we would welcome those during the break. Just in terms of the organization of the document, at one of our early meetings, we talked about how we might restructure some of General Plan 2020 into somewhat revised element titles, and we have these on the right-hand side of the screen. You see these kind of 4 major topic areas: our built environment, which is land use, community design, preservation, neighborhoods, our natural environment, and then connecting the city, and then opportunity for all, and then a plan to action section, which is focused on implementation, aligns this a little bit more with the guiding principles, and I think elevates a few topics like climate change. We don't have a sustainability element any longer because we've incorporated sustainability throughout the document. Open space was originally going to land in the conservation element. Based on feedback from many of you, that wasn't a comfortable fit, and so we have a parks, recreation, and open space element now, which flows a little more smoothly. We had talked about changing the name of the safety element to resilience or environmental hazards. At the end of the day, and I think once the pandemic hit, we thought, nah, it's safety. We're going to call it safety, and we're still going with that. Which is actually the state requirement in any event. So I won't go into more detail on this. This is just to show you where we landed with respect to the organization of the chapters. So just some highlights of the elements in the first half of the document, and then we'll pause for questions on the built environment and natural environment policies. We have 3 major goals. in the land use element, well-managed growth, a complete community, and distinctive neighborhoods. And there is a stronger emphasis in the General Plan 2040 than in the prior plan on climate change and sea level rise, consistent with where we are in the world today. Again, very few map changes outside of downtown San Rafael. I think this was one of the initial charges, is that we were really moving the time horizon forward of General Plan 2020 and not looking at major revisions outside of downtown. The floor area ratio and height map for areas outside of downtown are not changing. There are consistency edits to this element that have been made to reflect the downtown precise plan. And we are maintaining the limits on housing in industrial areas, meaning that housing is not permitted in industrial areas. This was a discussion that we had at a number of our committee meetings. And at the end of the day, the policies and programs do not support residential uses in industrially zoned areas. We've already made some reference to the neighborhoods element. We expect to begin posting chapters of this element to the website next week. And the major difference here, in addition to soliciting input from the neighborhood groups on the text revisions, is we are grouping the 30 neighborhoods that are currently listed alphabetically into 5 clusters, so that there's a more organic flow between how this element works, so that North San Rafael is treated as a unit, and each neighborhood continues to have its own section under that banner heading, but there are also some global policies for the entire area. Same for the San Pedro Peninsula, the central San Rafael neighborhoods, downtown San Rafael, and then the southeast San Rafael and Canal areas. In the community preservation and design element, I'm going to jump to the last bullet because I actually think it's one of the more important ones. Historic preservation was kind of a topic that was landing half in the arts and culture element and half in the community design element. And at one point in this process, we were putting it in with arts and culture. And I have to say, part of the reason we were doing that is to balance the length of the elements. But when you looked at those in their totality, it really, to me, did not work to treat historic preservation with the arts and culture element. It's just the policies and the emphasis of that was so strongly on design and design heritage that we have now put the historic preservation policies as a goal and a set of policies in the community design section of the plan. There was some pretty major reorganization of the content of this element based on feedback from the steering committee. And one of the big topics we talked about when we had our discussion was to clarify the difference between objective standards, which are required by state law, SB 35, for multifamily and mixed use development, and design guidelines. And I think there was a feedback we got that those were sort of mushed together too much and it wasn't really clear how they worked together. We've really tried to separate those and clarify which is, how they work hand in glove and the distinction between those two. And again, you see the 5 goals of this element on the left. Moving on to the natural environment, the conservation and climate change chapter. Some of you may recall we had a steering committee meeting where we broke out into 4 small groups and we attempted to tackle this entire element in a single meeting in 4 small groups. And I want to thank the climate change and sustainability subgroup for making some pretty significant suggestions on how to reorganize this content to make it a little bit more intuitive. And this is what led to the open space conversation moving to a different element of the plan. There is now a goal that specifically deals with water and a goal that specifically deals with energy. We've added what we're calling a climate change crosswalk because it was a little awkward trying to deal with climate change in one place when it's dealt with throughout the plan. So this essentially is a guide to where climate change is addressed in the mobility element and in land use and the other chapters of the plan. There was a lot of conflicting input from the committee on wetlands and wetland policies, and we did our best to respond to your feedback and input. Some of it is going to require some follow-up, and we've identified some programs to continue that conversation into the future. We've also expanded the creek and water quality policies, including some fairly robust green streets policies that were suggested by the water quality subgroup at that meeting. Parks, recreation, and open space. There was, as I mentioned, the open space goal is now included, but we removed the food production policy, which caused some heartburn for folks in the small group meeting. We've clarified the park and lieu standards and the acreage standards based on feedback from the committee. We had some lengthy discussion at our committee meeting about whether or not we should include a table or narrative on park needs in this document, carrying forward information or updating information from General Plan 2020. We did restore and update that information based on the committee's feedback, so you will find a table in the current document that shows areas that have gaps in park service and areas where additional maintenance and rehabilitation of facilities or new facilities are needed until such time that a parks master plan is developed. We also added policies on public-private partnerships, and many of you observed kind of a tension between the open space policies and the wildfire, I should say the habitat policies and the wildfire policies, and we tried to address that tension through language in the policies that mostly recognize that it is a balance between these factors. I only included this just to show you a sample of what the graphics and the maps look like. This is the a map of open space resources in the city. We are using color maps, and to Linda's point earlier, we will make these maps available before the document is printed and highlight the changes from General Plan 2020. In this case, the biggest change is it's in color. Hooray, we can do that in 2020 when it was not really feasible in 2004. The safety element, again, I mentioned we retained the original name. There is a series of policies, and I don't want to say that they're new. They were not in the original draft that we provided to you, but we did provide them to you at a later date. A set of sea level rise policies that have been prepared by staff that are intended to address that, specifically address that issue. I mentioned we added policies and programs on public health emergencies, and also updated and upgraded our evacuation policies based on feedback from the committee. And finally, in this section, we have the noise element. There were some comments at our committee meeting about the acoustical study requirements, which have been clarified. There is a table, kind of a bar chart table in that about the acceptable noise levels, and there were overlaps in the original table, which we've eliminated. We've added language about coordinating review of noise impacts with Marin County, and because there was quite a bit of controversy, at least in the written comments, about the proposal to consider a ban on gas-powered yard equipment, we actually do not have that program in the new element as well. So with that, I'm going to pause for questions and comments. Since we're on this transition slide, this is a plug that I'm going to put in for Youth and Arts. This is the group that was supposed to come to our March meeting and present their vision for 4th Street for us. They actually did a Zoom presentation, and I got to be the judge in that presentation. It was a 3rd grade class, and that's available, I believe, on YouTube. So I'll send you guys the information on that. But it was quite wonderful to see what they had in mind for 4th Street. And with that, we're on to the discussion. Thanks.
Anything earth-shattering come from the 3rd grade for 4th Street that we should know about?
My favorite thing that they had in their presentation is they wanted to drape this sort of like Cristo public art sculpture off of 101 as you came into town on 4th Street, so that it looked like you were driving through a waterfall. And I mean, it just was very creative and very cool. And they said it'll put San Rafael on the map. And I just thought that's nothing I would have ever thought of. But you know, it stuck with me.
Well, that's great. Thank you for that. It's fun to have a little different view, right? I don't remember what my 8-year-old self might have been like enough to say. Do we have any questions on Barry's presentation so far, or comments, discussion items? I'll take a regular hand up, a virtual, oh, there goes a virtual hand up. Let's see, but it's hard for me to figure out who it is. I have to scroll. There we go, Kate. Okay, go ahead, Kate.
I have a comment first on the guiding principles. I do think there are a lot of bullets and there's some redundancy, and I do think that it's worth going back over them one more time. I read through the guiding principles of the city of Pasadena, and they're just 7 statements. And I do think that if we were to use a graphic, that we could put those statements in the graphic, but combine some of the different topics, because they're guiding principles. We don't need education under opportunity for all, and you know, another topic that we could combine them a little bit more. And I intend to put those comments, submit those comments, and going forward. The other thing that I wanted to request in kind of a high level is there's a lot of terminology in the land use and community design section that I think would be valuable to have definitions in the back of the document at some point. I, for one, don't know the difference between development standards, development review process, performance standards, and how those are determined, use permit requirements, land use categories in terms of density and intensity standards, plan development zoning process versus plan development zoning districts, and whether those are referring to precise plan or specific plan. So just some of that planning terminology, maybe in the implementation section, doing a list of definitions. And I also think it would be valuable in the final document to have links to, in the land use section or the community design section, to where somebody could be reading through the general plan and then link on the performance standards for the section that they're reviewing in the general plan, and it could go directly to the city's website on where those performance standards can be found, because I find it difficult myself to find things. Those are my comments.
Thank you.
Can I just respond to one thing that Kate mentioned before we go to the next speaker? I'm completely in agreement with you about the hyperlinks. And one thought that I had as I was preparing the final summary of goals, policies, and programs is there are a lot of cross-references to other policies. And to the extent that we can include hyperlinks, at least in the final document, if not the draft, we will do that. And we will make it much easier to read a policy and be able to click on a hyperlink to get to the reference policy instead of having to thumb through a document to do that.
Okay, and I think Jeff was next with a hand, and then I see Bill too, and I'll keep looking. Go ahead, Jeff.
My comment is regarding the no commission for preservation. And what I'm wondering is, does that preclude having an advisory committee to the Planning Commission?
It does not preclude having an advisory committee. In fact, the language of the text is to consider creating an advisory committee. I think what we heard loud and clear from both the subcommittee in the written comments is there's really not the resources at this time to create an entirely new city commission, and but there might be benefit to having a committee or an expert that is called in as needed, and that is what the text recommends.
Thanks.
Sure, and then I saw Bill's real hand, and then we're going to go to Linda with a virtual hand and Bob Miller after that. So, Bill.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, everybody. Good to see everyone. So, yeah, I was wondering about the form-based code, which is one of the more dramatic changes growing out of this process, and wondering how that will be incorporated in or referenced in the general plan. And I guess along those lines, a general question too about the actual relationship between the general plan and the specific plans, or the precise plans, starting with the downtown that's already in process, et cetera, but also in anticipation of the precise plans that have been requested in North San Rafael and I guess in the canal as well. So how's all that being worked in?
Okay, so in most cases, in something like the land use element, the document defers to the downtown plan for the detailed information. So for development standards and height, et cetera, there's a cross-reference to see the downtown precise plan for additional detail. We also have a set of policies in the neighborhoods element that specifically deals with downtown, that tries to capture the high-level recommendations of that plan. But I would say on issues related to community design and preservation and land use, that the General Plan 2040 really defers to the downtown plan as the source of policy guidance for those areas. We're not repeating that information in the general plan or attempting to recharacterize or recapture it. And at this point, there's no intent to use form-based codes outside of downtown. So for those other planning areas, I think the expectation is that would be either traditional zoning or or to be determined later on through a public process.
And did I hear that you would be circulating the next iteration of the downtown plan for review by the steering committee?
We're hoping to convene a subcommittee of steering committee members that will be tasked with having a hard look, particularly at the form-based code. We feel like we've provided feedback and input, but really would like to hear from some of our committee members about those standards.
Thanks, Bill. Linda?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. One is, I just note on the map, we if you're colorblind, the color maps are problematic, which is why we went with black and white. It wasn't, and the other reason was because there probably were more hard copies around, and it's very expensive to do color maps, or it was back then. It may not be quite so much now, but those are the reasons. And I think that if all the maps are going to be in color, there probably should be some sort of note for visually impaired to know, or the people who are colorblind, to know how to get the right information. It's impossible to read. Our map maker back then was colorblind, so that's why. The other one is, between this one and the next one, the next part here is, have you, or will you have a chance to test drive a project to see what changes there might be in the review process compared to what it looks like now, and what changes there might be to fees compared to what it is now, and just using a project that's probably already gone through review, like maybe the hotel downtown or the senior living up in North San Rafael, but just to give an indication of whether we were successful in the other goals of simplifying and clarity for projects. So,
Good thought.
Okay, and Bob Miller, please.
Yeah, I want to second Kate Power's suggestion for having a map with watersheds, waterways, creeks, pumps, underground pathways for waters, just to see where the water all forms of conveyance of water are. It would help environmentalists by seeing all that in one map. Second is the more general question I have is there are, as I indicated to you offline, there are a number of people that want to submit more comments on the fire and native plants for the parks, open space, and recreation sections. And were you indicating that end of June is the best time to get those comments in?
Yes, so we would appreciate comments by the end of June. You know, we'll continue to take comments after that. I'm not saying that's a hard deadline. That will guarantee that any comments that you provide are considered in the public review draft. Comments that come in later, end of July, August, et cetera, will be more difficult to include, but they could still be, you know, registered for as the public review draft is being reviewed by city commissions and council. I would say it's always better to get the changes in before this goes out as a public review draft. So if there's a way to do that before the end of the month, that would be appreciated.
There is, and thank you.
And Bonnie. Bonnie, we can't hear you just yet. You're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Apologies there, so sorry. Barry had mentioned new topic areas regarding COVID-19, and I'm just wondering if you could kind of either send us something to kind of tell us where they are in the document so we know, because yes. I assume they're scattered around, and do we have to read everything, you know, to try and figure out what it is that you're referring to?
Yeah, I can do that. And I'll say it's not as simple as just doing a word search for COVID-19 or pandemic, because there are references that you may not see immediately and think, oh, that's because of the pandemic, but they were added for that reason. So think something like the design of public transportation systems for hygiene, for example, is something that was added. So I will do that. I'll send out that highlight.
Because one of the things I'm wondering about is, you know, as we change our mindset for, you know, how we use our restaurants, you know, now there's so much takeout, and some of them are like more like markets, and things are just changing in innovative ways that we hadn't expected. And I'm thinking about how the changes might affect our view of the downtown precise plan and how things are going to work downtown and how it might look in the future. So anyway, I don't know whether any of that might have been kind of incorporated yet, or maybe it might be worth sending in a comment at some point. So it'd be helpful to know. Also, I just was reading about, and maybe I'm slow on the uptake on this, SB 1385. And I was wondering about if that were to become law, how would that affect the downtown precise plan in particular? And is there any way to anticipate some kind of change like that? And is there the flexibility in the plan to kind of address it should it be enacted?
Thanks. Yeah, I might ask Paul or Rafi to respond to the SB 1585 question, or else we will look into that and get back to you on that.
It's 1385. I believe it's SB 1385.
85.
Yeah, I think that's a disaster type of bill from the state that is.
I'm talking about, it's about residential development in a commercial zone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, to be honest with you, there are bills that come out and are talked about, you know, daily from the state.
Right.
There's packages of laws that get enacted. Many laws don't get enacted. What we can do is use our best judgment of what laws are currently in effect now when we adopt the plan. If new laws come into place, we'll have to amend and update the general plan periodically as we would do over the years of the life of the plan. The general plan is not static once it's adopted. It will get updated, it will get reviewed. I don't know the specifics of that one. Like I said, there's lots of laws that come out every day, different ideas, and until they get closer to being adopted is when we start to really pay attention to them. So it would be something that, if adopted, we would evaluate, and if there's any changes needed to the general plan, we would make those at that time.
Thank you.
Looks like we have Jeff again.
Should there be some policy in the general plan document regarding the two proposals for establishment of PDAs, one in the Northgate area and one in Southeast San Rafael?
We have language in the plan right now about doing plans for both of those areas, but we're not including any language specific to a PDA. I think that's a active conversation that the council is having, and by the time this gets adopted, it may be appropriate to include language on that, but I would not presume the outcome of that conversation at this time.
Paul, I couldn't tell if you were gonna want to add something or.
Yeah, so sorry. I'm working from my iPad and I couldn't find my little bar with all the things on.
I could see your arm and your hand, so I wondered.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you. I kind of expected that question to come up, and it's a really good one. Right now, I would say we should not include that in the general plan for a couple of reasons. I mean, the way that the PDA tool works is that it could change in terms of boundaries over time. It could be rescinded. And right now, we're looking at it primarily for its value as a tool for hopefully financing a deeper dive specific plan for two areas of the city, if indeed we end up designating as such. So there's a lot of what if still. And so, you know, we're opting probably not to do that right now in the general plan.
Seems premature.
Yeah.
Thank you. With that, knowing that we have a second part to Barry's presentation and some lighter content to get to share a little bit at the end, I'd like to leave time for all of that. So I think we should move on.
Okay, thank you. And I will again share my screen so we can move on to the next presentation.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're now in the two major sections of the plan, one dealing with connecting the city and the next dealing with opportunity for all. So we are starting with the mobility element, and we have our goals here on the left: our regional leadership, cleaner transportation, high quality affordable transit, which are mostly guidance for transit service providers, things that the city does not control but supports. Safe, attractive streets that connect the community, and safe walking and cycling, and well-managed parking. Highlights: I did feel it was important to say that this element got 2 pages shorter because we got a lot of feedback from you that this was too dense and too big and too massive. And although there were some folks who were pulling a little bit the other direction, we were able to merge some of the policy content and some of the program content. I don't think we lost anything. But I believe the flow is a little smoother now with these edits that have been made. We also placed a stronger focus on the cost-benefit issue and cost-benefit analysis, including recognizing safety as a benefit and climate change mitigation and so forth as a benefit. Additional emphasis in the revised policies, and I believe a goal on transportation efficiency. Looking at periodic evaluations of our transit policies based on the status of the SMART train, and recognizing that we will revisit these policies as necessary as that evolves and changes. There was a policy that caused a lot of, I think, frustration, or maybe I don't know if that's the right word, but there was basically saying you can't do a bike lane if it takes away parking. we have softened that language and I think come up with a language that's a little more balanced on that topic area. And again, this last point, which I mentioned in the first presentation, we are going to the City Council on July 6th for a conversation about how transportation will be measured, transportation impacts will be measured in the future. At this point, the intent is to retain level of service outside of downtown and to include new vehicle miles traveled policies, I should say criteria and thresholds, which are required by state law for environmental impact reports. So I do want to encourage the steering committee members to read that staff report when it comes out the week before that meeting, and then please do attend virtually that City Council meeting on July 6th. We may ask for, again, a group of, I think I called it a coffee talk with a subcommittee of this group here beyond that July 6th date to essentially say, here's what we heard from the council, and here is the proposal for how that LOS and VMT policy metric will be baked into General Plan 2040. It's very much in motion right now, and not I will say we should not have included that draft policy M2.5 that was the subject of the letter you saw earlier. That was a holdover from the December draft that does not yet reflect some of the input we've received since that time. Community services and infrastructure, again, a bigger or continued focus on cost benefit analysis as a factor in deciding how and where to invest in infrastructure and community service improvements. We've included additional language on business and educational partnerships. So essentially encouraging our schools and business community to work together, partnerships with Dominican, and really creating a tighter link between those two components of the community. There is a suggestion to do a police department strategic plan. Has nothing to do with the events of the last week, but it's timely that there is a thought about how to to be responsive in the way we deliver police services. More focus on sustainable stormwater management. This would be in the infrastructure policies. So we have a lot of drainage and stormwater policies, both here and in conservation. I think we've increased the emphasis on sustainable and natural solutions. We've also added language on microgrids and backup power sources and the hardening of our telecommunication infrastructure. This is all based on committee conversations and feedback that you provided in writing. Arts and culture, we have the benefit on this topic area of a stakeholder group with about a dozen participants from the arts community, and several steering committee members were present at that meeting. We incorporated their feedback, and there was a lot of it. I mean, there was verbal feedback and there was written feedback from members for those who participated in that. As you all know, we also had a subcommittee that convened in April to talk about those draft policies. Some of the guidance that we've included is less specificity. That's a new one, less specificity in naming places and events so that the document doesn't become obsolete. And already, even on this slide, I took off the picture of the Italian Street Painting Festival and put in something on the Art Walk instead, case in point. Also, that there be a greater focus on North San Rafael in this chapter, because it was seen as being very downtown focused. And so we have expanded conversation about North San Rafael resources and Northgate Mall as a potential arts magnet. Looking at the role of technology in how it is a tool for the arts, and then new funding sources that might be explored in the future related to the arts. Moving into the opportunity section on economic vitality, we have our 3 goal statements on the left. There was a lot of restoration of the original language from General Plan 2020. I think we maintained the new structure of this document, but in some cases, at the encouragement of our committee members and actually a CAC meeting where there was also some preference expressed to go back to the 2020 language on a couple of particular topic areas. This is one of the chapters where we have some short-term actions on pandemic recovery. I realize that this may not be adopted till the end of the year, but we think these actions and policies are still important enough that regardless of where we are at the end of the year, it's very critical to make a very affirmative statement in the general plan about helping our small businesses recover from what they're going through now and helping the city as a whole in economic recovery moving forward. Again, more emphasis on partnerships and engaging the business community and our brokers and so on in policy development and programs. More emphasis on measurement and measuring the effectiveness of programs. Innovation is another topic that we tried to weave in the latest revisions. And there was a policy that described leveraging our waterfront identity that a couple of folks had issue with as being more of a design policy. But interestingly, it sparked a conversation about the need for a policy to preserve our water-dependent businesses and to recognize that there's a need for canal dredging and there are economic benefits to maintaining waterfront business and commerce that might fit in this element. And so there's policy language on that topic area that was not in the earlier draft. Equity, diversity, and inclusion, which is the newest element of the general plan. And this is partially in response to SB 1000, which is a state law that requires that we address these topics, but also to the very real need for some policies that recognize some of the issues in San Rafael that we addressed throughout the plan, I think that have been highlighted in the recent pandemic. So we've got language in this document, in this chapter, on healthy communities and environmental justice, on housing security and stability, on achieving equity in the way we deliver services, including police, fire, education, and so on, improving access to education and economic opportunity. So a lot of emphasis on workforce development and a pathway to employment for our youth. And then finally, the goal of an age-friendly community, building in some of the work of age-friendly San Rafael and providing the groundwork for their strategic plan that's now underway. I mentioned earlier that the housing element is not being updated, but to reinforce that this is all one plan and it is cohesive, we did not change the element, but we are including it in this update for the benefit of everybody on this call. The housing element must be updated by state law for a planning period that's going to begin, I think it's January 1, 2023, that will run for 8 years. And the goal of that process is for the city to show that it has the capacity to meet its fair share of the region's housing needs for each income group. And that's something that's defined by ABAG through a process called the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or the RHNA. As soon as the general plan ends, you're going to start hearing about the RHNA, because we've all been warned that the numbers are going to double for cities around the Bay and that we need to be prepared for that. One of the benefits of having General Plan 2040 adopted as we do the housing element is that we will have increased our capacity, especially downtown, to meet those future needs. I mentioned earlier there's an implementation chapter. This is not considered an element of the general plan. In fact, it may not even be adopted as part of the plan. It may be an appendix, but essentially it's a roll-up of all of the action programs in the document and an indication of who is the responsible department, what is the time frame, and what are the resources that the city has to implement the program. This is something that's in General Plan 2020. But it's embedded in each element of the plan. We're pulling that out and putting it in an implementation chapter that can be updated, monitored, and tracked on an ongoing basis. So we'll be able to prepare general plan progress reports with this, essentially this as a pull-out chapter of the plan. Okay, that concludes the part 2 presentation, and I'll turn it back to Stephanie.
Would it be really bold to say that might be the last PowerPoint we see in this group format?
Only if that's a good thing.
I mean, it's a lot of hard work. Thank you for your hard work. And where would we like to begin? Cecilia.
Yeah, I just had a quick question on if it's typical to memorialize a crisis during planning in the planning document itself. I wasn't not really sure if that's a typical strategy, or if you just kind of assume people will know in that particular year this particular thing happened. And so I just was wondering if you could comment on that, Barry.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, this is new for all of us. I think you'll find if you look at the plans that were done in communities that had catastrophic wildfires, that's front and center in those plans. And although they may be fully recovered by their horizon year, there's a big recovery trajectory that's embedded in that plan. You know, we're putting that emphasis in this plan, recognizing that we're going to be looking at, you know, potential amendments in a few years, and that there is a progress report done on the general plan every year and a revisiting of the major policies every 5 years. So we have an opportunity. I mean, it's not going to be another 20 years before we look at this again. So I think it reflects priorities at this point in time, and that it is appropriate to do that. At the same time, we don't want to assume that we're stuck in this place for 20 years and we can't think 20 years out that things will be different and still express these aspirations. And I don't know, Paul wants to add to that. Yeah, I was going to ask if Paul.
You know, and that's a really good question. Sometimes it's always about timing. General plans will often identify things that have come up in recent years, either because we're reacting to some change or we're trying to prepare for an event or something similar to that. And one good example is that our general planning puts a lot of attention on the Fire Prevention Action Plan, which was in response to, obviously, fire hazards that we've had in the last couple of years and that continued threat of fire. So I think the intent is just to make sure that is acknowledged in here and address things where we know that we can prepare moving ahead, like in a program or a policy or whatever. So all I'm saying is pretty much what Barry's saying, with just a little more information. So.
Thank you. And I see hands from Jeff Rhodes and Linda Jackson. So we'll go in that order. Jeff?
There's a fairly obvious tension between the Canal Promenade and the water-oriented business aspects of our plan. And I think it's fairly obvious. It's kind of come up in discussion, particularly with those along that have maritime businesses along the canal. I'm not really sure how we reconcile that, but it has come up in a number of discussions with folks in the Maritime Channel Association. And I guess the other thing that the term water-related business or water-related activity kind of sticks in my craw a bit. I think perhaps maritime might be a better choice of words. Just a suggestion.
Great, thank you.
Linda.
I just want to reiterate what Cecilia was trying to address. We just have to be very careful that we're not planning with the topic du jour. If we were writing a plan in 2001, we would not have, you know, September 11th was important. We couldn't have envisioned the changes that happened to our culture in 2001 that happened over the next 5-10 years. So, you know, nobody said the word pandemic in 2019. You know, we just cannot talk about restructuring our entire culture and the whole world when we already see people, you know, in another year. We will have waves. I mean, that's what we hear from the experts. But life will go on, and we will go back to being able to meet in the same room again and sit next to each other. This is not a permanent state. So as you're looking through it, I really urge you to, you know, instead of pandemic, you're talking about health concerns. You're talking about being safe in a healthy way. And so I just would urge that.
Linda, thank you. It's good wisdom. Okay, I see two more hands, Bill and Kate. Bill?
Yeah. So maybe a little counterbalance on that topic. It seems to me that, you know, one of the big impacts of the last several months has been to reveal a lot of ongoing vulnerabilities within our community, kind of structural vulnerabilities. And those are with us and need to be dealt with, I think, in a 20-year time horizon. I'm thinking of housing. I'm thinking of transit and mobility, even the culture, you know, figures into this, environmental justice, certainly, and economic development, certainly. So, all, I mean, we've got a whole retail basis of the city that's been very much is very much in transition and is very vulnerable, and this pandemic has demonstrated that. So I think it points us to things that do need to be dealt with, and I think rereading these policies through that lens, I think we can look at, well, what can we do, you know, long term to address these things? And I think it goes way beyond, you know, things like, well, how do you arrange seating in a plaza or on a bus? It goes way beyond that to fundamental aspects of our community. So, yeah, particularly the economic, I mean, the justice, equity chapter, I think we should look at very closely. If anybody listened to the Board of Supervisors meeting this week, you know, it was dominated by the question of resources going to police departments. And are those resources, could they be more effective in addressing the vulnerabilities of our community if they were spread out, or if they were applied in some other direction? So, you know, that's an immediate thing, but it's a long-term thing too. So I think we should be looking at all of this as we reread it. The other, and I want to end with one question. You know, we got two quite impassioned letters today on the mobility section. I feel like we as a steering committee shouldn't just pass over those. And so my question to Paul and Barry is, well, what's your response to that? Where are we going with, you know, with the LOS question? And can there be like a planning commission rather than the traffic engineer put in there, and some of those other specific requests? Thank you.
Do you want, Paul, are you going to take that now?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I have to say this, you know, like Barry said, in retrospect, what was put in here really was too premature. It was something that was drafted late last year when we were in the middle of discussions with the city council about VMT and level of service and what to do with level of service. And I know that we heard loud and clear from the city council that we need to retain level of service in our community, at least outside the downtown area. And we have had a lot of discussions since then. And I mean, definitely we're going to go back and change what you see in here and revisit some of those comments. And we're going to be meeting with a couple of groups before we head to the city council with this in July. So I'd expect that you're going to see some changes, and some very much in the direction of which you saw in Shirley Fisher's letter. And Barry, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I just want to add that it's very much a work in progress, and you know, we're definitely, well, in some respects, moving more to what was in General Plan 2020 on this topic. I don't know that it's going to be the same, but you know, it will be something more resemblant of that than what is in that current draft that you have.
So I got to add that, you know, I was at a lot of those meetings, and I felt the language that was in there, which as a member of the steering committee I had looked at pretty closely, represented a balancing of, you know, two different points of view on LOS versus vehicle miles traveled. And so I would encourage you to keep that balance intact going forward, and which I think could be done while still being responsive to some of the specific concerns raised in the letter, like who's getting to decide, you know, how to handle a particular development.
Yep, good point.
Kate.
Thank Thank you, Bill, for your comments. I agree with that. My general comments are, I'm a little bit disappointed in the passiveness of the climate and sustainability statements. A lot of them started with encourage or support or consider, and I think the next 20 years are critical for us as a planet to address sustainability, address climate change, address adaptation to sea level rise. I felt like the term water quality usually to me refers to supply as opposed to stormwater and runoff into our creeks, which flows into our bay, which impacts a whole food web of creatures that are critical to our well-being of the planet. So anyway, I think that San Rafael's Climate Action Plan doesn't have behind it the implement and fund emphasis that it really needs. And I was kind of hoping that the general plan would kick it down the road a little bit harder by mentioning the climate action plan, but not, and tying it into the specific places in the plan where we are going to address adaptation to sea level rise and mitigation. I understand in the mobility element that San Rafael as a jurisdiction itself doesn't have a lot of decision-making power over transit success, the success of transit. But if we're going to depend on the success of transit in planning for transit-oriented design, we're going to design for compact development around a train station. The meeting that I was in the League of Women Voters the other day, people were talking about SMART is very quickly draining its reserve funds, and the future is not that clear. And so I do think that the general plan is dependent on what transportation and mobility looks like, and has to identify where it does have an impact on transportation choices and opportunities. And I think that, I'd like to see language like ensure the protection of creeks in the bay by preventing pollution, plastics and other trash from entering them, because the city by law is going to have to do stormwater catchment. And how do we actively engage in the North Bay Watershed Association's One Water approach, or how do we actively engage with the Marin County Stormwater Pollution Prevention Planning? Not really sure how the general plan is really clear on that. The other thing I just wanted to mention quickly is in the implementation section, it is mentioned in one part of the plan about how the Planning Commission development projects will be reviewed at the Planning Commission prior to going to design review. And at one of our meetings, it was discussed whether the design review board should be combined with the Planning Commission. I'm not sure if there was anything that, I don't recall it coming back to the steering committee on what the latest thinking was on that. But I do think it's the development review process and should be described in the implementation section. How do these policies and programs get implemented and possibly even get funded by the capital improvements planning process or whatever? I think that would be a valuable addition.
Thank you, Kate. with that, I think we'll take the next two people here with their hand up, and then I'd like to keep moving. DJ, Allison, and Bernice, and then we're going to move on in the agenda. But Barry, did you want to mention the folks in our our participant room first?
Yeah, just to say for those who joined us in progress, if you are an attendee at this meeting, if you have a comment or question that you'd like to make during public comment, you need to type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and then I will be reading it aloud into the record when we get to that point in the meeting. We're not really set up for putting the attendees on, on voice in this setup, so we are asking that you please submit any questions using that Q&A box for that last part of the meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. DJ.
Hi. My comment was just about this policy ED 3.4. It's the water dependent business policy, the draft that you got in here. And I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Jeff was saying earlier. This is my first read of this policy. And one thing that I worry about in the way it's written is that it to me sort of seems to peg all of our waterfront as really only being designed for maritime uses. And I think, reframing this in a way where it more emphasizes water-oriented businesses, businesses that make use of their waterfront. They don't need to be necessarily water dependent, but they make use of the fact that they're waterfront businesses. And I think the Montecito Shopping Center is the classic poster child of a bad development that doesn't make any use of the fact that it's got hundreds of feet of waterfront space. And so I just, when I read this, I think, this basically says that a commercial development that creates a waterfront promenade and water-facing businesses wouldn't fit into this policy. And I think, that kind of stuff is in line with some of the other policies about promenades and, creating a waterfront. So while I'm not trying to replace any of our maritime focused businesses, I do want policies that are going to fit well with people who want to redevelop parts of the canal that are currently not water-oriented to ways that are more water-oriented, if that makes sense.
Okay, Stephanie, you're on mute.
Oh, so now it's me that's muted. Sorry, Bernice, thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a comment following Kate's comments on her feeling about these policies not being strong enough. So my understanding is as we move forward, this is a live document and we're going to develop more work programs in being a way to implement and reach all of these goals in the plan. And I was wondering if you could just talk about that, Barry, because I know you and I had a conversation on that in the past, that I tend to feel that these policies overwhelm me, like, oh my God, how are we going to get all this done? But it's a combination of ordinances and then, referencing the downtown plan and everything else. So I was just wondering if you could just provide a comment on that.
Absolutely. In general, the general plan uses a lot of encourage and words that are more aspirational. Is not meant to be, it is a regulatory document insofar as the land use map is what drives the zoning map, and that is certainly regulatory, and there are things like height maps in the plan and transportation improvement maps that are the shall component of this. But for the most part, the appropriate language in the general plan it's really intended to be what our aspirations are for the next 20 years. And that's why you see the support and encourage and those terms. And actually, in a few cases where we went further than that, there was some pushback from the committee that we had actually gone too far in that direction, and an interest in seeing more language using those encourage and support. That's not to say there's not a place for the mandate and require and the specific, that sort of language has a place in the document too. But we really use that only on those cases where we're teeing up a very specific and in many cases required ordinance that maybe is a county ordinance or a state law or something of that nature. And I don't know if Paul or Ralph, you wanted to add on to that. Okay.
Is that a yes or a no? Yeah.
No, I think that was a no.
Okay, I see Roger. I guess that'll be my last one then. I mean it this time.
I guess I just want to chime in on this. When it gets, things need to be flexible at the same time. One of the, it all ties together. The maritime restrictions that used to be in place on the canal businesses made it impossible to pretty much do anything because there wasn't any demand for maritime related space. And so nothing that the properties that were getting old and outdated were not being redeveloped because there's nobody who could fit their businesses into the requirements. So something more flexible is important to have in order to get things to happen. And you have to rely a bit on the process to, by stating what is preferred is often enough to get things going, but it may not be enough. If you're too specific, it blocks anything from ever happening. And it's kind of like Paul's housing report. You just overload the system.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts, your participation, certainly for your review, and Barry, the presentation, very helpful. I'd like to move on to some parting thoughts. Barry, if that works for you, did you have anything you wanted to say before we do that?
No, I still have no questions in the Q&A box for those who are in the attendees area. Just you can think of things to ask while you're listening to us do our parting thoughts.
So there's approximately 25 of us, a minute or less, and we're going to see if your chair can get through to each and every one of you in that amount of time. It's going to be a little bit like Jeopardy or something, right? Do, 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 do. And I think we are missing a few, so I won't, Don, I think Don is still up by phone. So I'll do my very best to go from the screen in no particular order, except for a few that I will leave till the end that are staff. And I actually like to begin with Omar, and I don't mean to put you on the spot in any way, but thank you for being the vice chair. And if you had some thoughts about the future of our San Rafael and our process in this committee, we'd love to hear that. Or if you're not in your chair, we'll skip. So just duly noted that I began with the vice chair for the record. And then now I'm going to the top of the screen, and on my screen next to me is Roger.
Oh, me first. Actually, I just want to say it's always a pleasure to work with other citizens and other community members in any process. I mean, we may not all agree, but it's always fantastic to work with people and be involved and be part of your community. So I appreciate another opportunity to do that in this general plan process. And my compliments, of course, to Stephanie, but Barry, you've done a great job in keeping things in order. So thank you very much for doing a fabulous job.
Thank you.
Eric, you're next in my Hollywood Squares.
My panoply of
very good
Brady Bunch. Yes, exactly. So 2.5 years ago, we looked at this project, and I remember the old adage, never eat anything bigger than your head. And it was the type of thing, it's like, good God, how are we going to do all of this? And again, my compliments to Barry and Stephanie and Ravi and Paul, and to all of us. It's been a real pleasure working with all of you, and just the way that we've collaboratively come together with direction, but just the entire process of going through it very, very meticulously, methodically, thoughtfully, and developing this living document, which will be revised as we go along and as our needs continue. But it's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to catch back up with Omar. We are hearing some parting thoughts about our city's future and certainly our process. And I had intended in no way to put you on the spot, but to thank you as the vice chair and to begin with you. We missed you, so I'd like to circle back and see and catch up with you now.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having some technology issues, but thank you for the opportunity to reflect. I didn't know it was going to be so much fun talking about planning for the city. So I want to thank all of you because I have learned a lot from this process just by sharing, having those very exciting conversations about how can we make our city a better city for everyone. I think representing the canal, representing the residents of the canal, we all know have been isolated, have not been integrated to the bigger community. I think it was a great opportunity for me to see that and to advocate for them. I will say the staff from the city have been fantastic responding to the needs of this community. Very thank you for your patience and support to make sure that all residents participate in the same way. And for the canal residents, what it took us is really when we had to go back a few steps to really help people understand that actually there is a plan in the city. Their voices can be counted. They are also part of everything that we discuss here. So yeah, overall has been a fantastic experience for me. I learned a lot. I'm looking forward for the 2060 plan. Count with my support. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next steps of the implementation of the plan. Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you. Okay, and I had seen Berenice's hand, but I think that was from before. So I'm just going to keep going in order on my screen, which takes me to Jeff Rhodes.
Oh my God. You know, I guess I learned a lot, and it was great working with all of you and hearing all the different points of view from all of the participants, from staff. I really would like to express, first off, a great deal of appreciation for all of the hard work of city staff and of Barry in leading this process and guiding us through it. I'm a city-oriented person, but I find it amazing how complex all the issues and needs are in a place like San Rafael, and really, I guess, value the opportunity to learn about them and to help shape the policy for the future. I'm really excited about the things that we have in front of us. I'm excited about a PDA for Northgate, excited about a PDA for Southeast San Rafael, excited about a shore adaptation plan, excited about the downtown plan. We have a lot of work to do, and I think a lot of us are going to need to continue to participate in order to help staff and council get to the goal line on a lot of these things. And I don't know, it's been an intense but wonderful 24 months.
30 months.
30, yeah.
30 months.
Please don't short us at all.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff. Bonnie.
Well, I think that it's been fabulous to learn from everybody who has brought so much to the table and such a breadth of experience and interest and knowledge from everybody that's participated on the steering committee, to the staff, to Barry, to the people who've shown up, the people who've written in, the people who have just participated in this process. But I think, to me, it's really interesting how it's kind of dovetailed with my sheltering in place. I mean, this time in the past couple of years that we've been thinking about the future, the next 20 years, but the time that we shelter in place and we can really hear the birds sing and we walk around and we see nature like we haven't seen it during our working years, during our rushing around time, but when we're sheltering in place and we have a new appreciation for our physical surroundings and our natural surroundings, I think it's a great time to be planning for the future. And I hope that many of the lessons that we've learned during the last few months will help invigorate the public process, just as the charrettes did. I think that this time at home for our community can help us going forward. And I really appreciate Bill's comments earlier about how, whether it's the equity issues or all these issues, I think the demonstrations that are going on, the policing issues that have come to the forefront. I mean, I've been dealing with policing issues for my career and racial inequality during, my 40 years in criminal justice, but it's now in everybody's face. And I think it needs to be part of our planning process as we look forward for the next 20 years and we incorporate our new normal. In our view for the future for our city.
Very thoughtful, thank you. Okay, now you guys are shifting all of a sudden. Kate.
I just want to echo Barry, you have been amazing. It's been a really enjoyable process under your leadership, and Stephanie under your leadership too. I appreciate your chairing the committee. Paul and Rafi, ongoing respect and gratitude for the type of work that you do for the city. And I'm grateful that the city attracts talented, dedicated, smart people. During sheltering in place, I've been thinking a lot about the concept of anti-fragility and how it's different from resilience. Resilience kind of is how you weather the storm to me and how you deal with what's coming. And I do think that we started out this planning process talking about change and how the plan has to address change. And I think being anti-fragile is evolving and learning and adapting. And I was happy to read this draft because I think there's a lot of that active approach in the plan. I think there's areas that need strengthening, in my opinion, and I will submit my comments this time, but I appreciate being part of this process with all of you. I tried to listen and understand from other stakeholders' perspectives, and I think I learned a lot during this process.
Thank you. Margaret.
Well, it's almost, we're all going to say the same thing. Everybody's been really great. This has been a wonderful experience. It has been. I don't know anybody who's responded to my emails quicker than Barry has. I mean, if anybody in my professional career who I email for any reason, Barry gets back like almost instantaneously. And so that's really, really appreciated. And all of the staff have been great to work with. I've been thinking during this sheltering in place period that just how lucky I am and how grateful I feel to live in such a beautiful place, that it really hasn't been a hardship, to be able to look out my window and walk down the street and be in a beautiful, safe place. And I really just feel very grateful for that. I've learned a whole lot about San Rafael, and I feel very, very happy about the future of San Rafael. I feel a little more frustrated and a little less happy about the future of North San Rafael, frankly, from the standpoint of someone who's been concerned about Galenas Creek for almost 30 years and not seen much happening, and seeing, Northgate Mall having some problems, and seeing some development proposals that are not very copacetic, I think, for the future of North San Rafael. So I'm a little less happy about that. And I think there's a whole lot more work to be done there. And I hope we can all stay involved in that. But thank you to all of you for being so great to work with.
Thank you. Next up for me is DJ.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the city staff and to Barry. It's been really nice working with such knowledgeable professionals who understand our community so well. And I've also really appreciated getting to meet all the people on the phone. It's a good group of people, a lot of collective wisdom, and also I'm sure it won't be the last time we work together on committees and initiatives and things. So yeah, I just want to say thanks to everybody.
Thank you. And Sparky.
Likewise, I have learned a great deal. I mean, I came into the conversation and it was sort of public, planning jargon in a sense, but I've learned, I did my best to catch up, and I've learned a lot, and I've appreciated the commitment of everyone on the steering committee and everyone working towards a common goal, and the respectful process. I think it was a really amazing process, and I credit the city staff and Barry for facilitating that process so well. And I'm proud of my city, and I'm looking forward to great things.
That's very well said. Bill Carney, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I've also enjoyed very much working with everybody on this and getting to know folks. I especially want to thank those of you that I don't necessarily always agree with. That's been a really good part of this process for me. And I've just been really struck by the magnitude of change across the board that San Rafael is facing. And also by the range of tools that we've seen over these 2 years for dealing with that change and, making the best of it as we evolve forward. And yeah, I enjoy it so much that I would ask the city to keep us together to look at that housing element when it rolls around. So, thank you.
You're not ready to stop working. That's fantastic. Tireless, I think, is the word I would use for you. Linda.
Oh my. I'll just say, I think for all of us, I'm just so honored to have served with all of you, because I know that you likely did very much what I did, which was go back to the groups that I know and say what's going on, including at the school board level. And I know that Barry and Paul were very responsive in keeping our superintendent up to speed with what the policies were developing. And also your work with youth and arts and working with Lauraldale students, because those students are students that need those kinds of opportunities to think about the future and think about their community in a way that they didn't ordinarily get in the classroom. I want to recognize for staff, everything everybody else said, but also Ann Derrick, who gave us the food, which we haven't had. Remember the food? And the intern that you had that produced all that work and kept you going. So I want to recognize that, as well as the planning commissioner, Berenice. It's just invaluable to have your words and council member Mary Beth Bushy, because you brought your perspectives in about what you're going to be working with this document more than anybody else. So that was very helpful. The two new topics that we really embedded in this time, the diversity element required by law and the sea level rise element, I think, critical topics, and glad to see them emerge as they did in this plan so that we can move forward with planning. The 2020, General Plan 2020 changed quite a bit from the General Plan 2000, but the heart of it remained the same. The framework remained the same. Topics shifted around a little bit, were updated, new things added, a few tweaks here and there. And I'd say this plan was the same way. The framework and the heart and soul of San Rafael, you could see the same thread go all the way back to General Plan 2000. And I think that's a strength of the work of this committee and of our staff in pulling all of our diverse opinions into a document that reflects our diverse community. We are unique in Marin County. And we're going to keep being that way by the framework that we have going forward. So I'll look for seeing you around town on the next project. And thank you for your leadership, Madam Co-Chair and Co-Chair Omar.
Thank you, Linda. Your experience in participating in a staff-like capacity last time has been really helpful. Thank you. Jeff Jones.
I also just wanted to say thank you to Barry for leading us through, Stephanie for your patience. A lot of passionate people on this committee, and you were very patient throughout it all. I learned a lot about the city of San Rafael and the city processes, and do appreciate it. It was great listening and participating. Paul and Rafi, thank you so much. We are definitely in great hands, and I'm very passionate about this city as well. And thank you. It was an honor being on this.
Thank you. Next up for me is Bob Miller.
So I learned a lot about San Rafael and about its issues. I got a better understanding of how different stakeholders are thinking about issues, including folks that I don't always agree with. And that's important to me. I was struck by the huge number of topics that this committee addressed. There are hundreds of specific policies. I didn't count them. Somebody should, because it would be impressive, and each received a lot of thought. I'm certainly happy that others are city planners because they do very valuable work, dealing in depth with hundreds of issues, and I'm happy not to do that work, but I realize the value of it. And I especially learned a lot about what cities can do, and also about what they cannot do without a big change in funding streams. So I want to thank you, Barry, Paul, Rafi, Stephanie, and others. It was well done.
Thank you. I'm going to skip to Jackie. Oh, Jackie, oh, there you go.
I did it.
You did it.
I had a lot of fun, and I really appreciated. Barry started off by telling us about all the other gazillion city plans in Northern California that he had done, and that was really interesting, and what different cities were doing. And I think, Stephanie, you and Barry run a fabulous meeting, in the in-person meetings particularly, where it's difficult. You've got 8 people wanting to talk, 3 people wanting to talk 100% of the time. You handled it gracefully, no conflicts. It was wonderful. And I also really appreciated 2 other things. One was the historic perspective between Paul and Rafi and Linda and Roger. Nothing came up that somebody didn't say, but don't you remember that 32 years ago, this happened for that reason? And it was actually very helpful to get historic context. So I really appreciated that. And the one thing, I tend to like to make material comments in writing. So I really liked the, each time we looked at a section, to have the 2020 plan, and I think it's partly because I participated on the 2020 plan. So I recognized every single paragraph, and I remembered the arguments and why and why it was written that way. And then we had the staff's comments, and then we could make comments. And I just found that invaluable to be able to do that. And the last thing I was really impressed with was how the committee's comments were incorporated a lot into the plan, as opposed to just, oh, well, yeah, never mind. But, you know, you can make comments, but that's it. The comments are all showing up in the plan. It was like, that was great. So thank you for everybody, to everyone.
Thank you, Jackie. And Karen.
Yes, 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 yes. I'm just going to kind of echo. I feel super honored to have been selected to be a part of this process. This was my first time doing anything like this. And I really came to this group looking through a lens of homelessness, because that's the community that I serve intentionally on a day-to-day and night-to-night and all the hours of the week basis. But to be given the opportunity to look at our city and the businesses and the stakeholders through a different lens, I think you all came to the table with a different level of expertise. And you spoke through that, and that was really powerful for me. So I appreciated that. I also have so much respect for Barry. This is a really hard job, I think. It's a little like wrangling cats and a little like data collection, and then putting those together and making a fun stew. And I really got to, I want to echo what Jackie said as far as historical context. My family and I have lived here since 2005. It's really easy to get embedded in the community through work, but when you are here as a community member, to get this opportunity to see the inner workings, it's like getting to see the wires and cogs behind a really, really magnificent clock. So I'm grateful to have had that opportunity. Thank you very much for having me.
We have to keep that clock running. That's our job. Looking forward. Thank you, Karen. Berenice.
Yeah, I was honored to be part of the panel when we interviewed for the general plan update manager. And I just want to confess that hands down, this was one of the best interviews, Barry, when we were looking for you. And I have stolen some of your talking points. It was really, really a great interview. You have not disappointed. Your knowledge on the topic and process is unparalleled. And just your ability to mediate some of the, somewhat difficult conversations that come, and your demeanor is impressive, professional, you're professional, you're articulate. It's really appreciated. And just your sense of humor. I also was lucky enough to ride with you when we did the drive-through around San Rafael, and that funny sense of humor, Barry. We need to go out for a beer one of these days. It was really, really nice, really appreciated. I appreciate all the members hearing their different perspectives, their respect, even though we don't agree on everything. And I just want to say that we as engineers have a reputation of not getting along with planners. But my respect for Barry, Paul, and Rafi keeps growing. Thank you so much. Thank you to Ann, Derek. I look forward to working with all of you in the next years in this plan. Eleanor from the Youth Commission, and with my children, I hope to overlap on tackling some of these issues, and just in general, honored to be part of this process. Thank you so much. I learned a lot, helped me tremendously with my current job. Thank you, all of you.
And Berenice, very nice transition, because Eleanor is next on my screen.
Hi, so I just joined later in 2019. So I came in when you guys were already relatively close to the end. But as a student, I just wanted to say that I have been so honored to be a part of this. I feel very privileged to have had this opportunity to learn so much about our city and also about the values of the members in our community. So just thank you so much. I feel so grateful.
I would say your patience is commendable, frankly. Thank you for sitting still with us for 25 nights in 30 months. Actually, I guess half of that. Yeah. And we'll thank your predecessor too. She was great as well. And with that, Richard is next.
Hi, yes. I just remember back to the day when we all met at Falkirk Mansion. I think that was January 2.5 years ago. And I think many of you, I had probably exchanges online, or and they had not become in-person exchanges, and it was really enriching to meet you in person. I want to call out a couple of people I really appreciate, but possibly don't think I appreciate them, but I want to say that I do. Jeff Rhodes in particular. I think as much as we have differences, I have learned a lot on the sustainability side and the floodwater issues. I definitely appreciate what you said. The second person I want to call out is a theme that I've been pushing for was cost effectiveness and cost efficiency of the city, instead of just a crusade to do one particular thing or another thing which sounded good, but to measure it with cost effectiveness. And I think it was only when Roger Smith spoke out and reinforced what I've been saying quite a few times during the meetings that I now see that reinforced and reflected throughout the plan. I also really like the tour of the city, as well as meeting you all. And it was just great to understand how committees work. They're definitely not perfect. They're not representative, but we all have diverse opinions. I hope going forwards that we can continue with the city doing responsible, well-paced planning and good outreach. I think it's really important. Thanks.
Thanks for your participation. Let's see. We had Roger and Kate already. Where do I have Jenny?
I'll mute myself. Just dittoing a lot of what everyone has said before. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to be on this committee and to participate in this committee. I'm always impressed with the depth of talent and the kind of intellectual capacity and the diversity of our citizens and residents who actually are willing to volunteer and participate. San Rafael is not a huge city, it's 60,000 people, but it's not small, and we definitely are geographically kind of diverse and spread out. So we have unique challenges because each region seems to have its own special set of needs and constraints. But I've just been really impressed with all of my colleagues and, like I said, all of their willingness to share and their perspectives from their stakeholder groups that they represented. And then finally, I would say that Barry was just amazing, and same for the staff. I've always been thoroughly impressed with the city staff. Rafi, Paul, and you, Stephanie, as the volunteering to do this, but it's been really wonderful, great experience.
Thank you, Jenny. Let's see, Cecilia, it gets harder and harder to say something creative, and I'm not putting you on the spot. You're like number 24 or something, 23.
You want me to say yes to everything, right?
No, I want you to say what's in your heart and what's in your mind.
So, yeah, I've been living and or working in San Rafael for over 30 years, almost 35 years. And so it's near and dear to my heart to be able to be a part of the planning process. I'm a bit of a policy wonk, and I've had a wonderful experience in my professional life to work with folks like Paul Jensen and Linda Jackson and Rafi already to do some of this work in the past. So going forward, the future is a big deal. I do want to say Barry is exactly true. Barry answers your emails, he answers your questions, he creates a great connection with you on a personal level, and Barry, I've always appreciated that. So thank you so much for being, when I had a question, you're right there to let me know that my questions were not dumb, or that they were always welcome. So that was nice. I don't drink beer, but I'd have a glass of wine with you if you wanted. And Stephanie, you've done a great job. It's not an easy group to keep moving forward with progression, and you've done a really fabulous job. And I always look to you as my inspiration in your leadership. So appreciate that. Omar, thanks so much. I've always learned a lot from you. And I'll say this to the whole group. I've had an opportunity to know a lot of people, but this particular steering committee, I've had the opportunity to actually meet quite a few new faces, new people, new leaders. And so I really appreciate that. And I want to say thank you. It's been 30 months, man. It's been 30 months. So it's been a good 30 months. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. And before I let the staff say a few things, I just wanted to thank all of you. My parents moved to San Rafael when I was 1. I went to school all through San Rafael High and came back to San Rafael. My mother stayed here until I was about 25. I turned 50 during this process. Frankly, I turned 50 in April during shelter in place, and it has been really great to transition into carrying forward a family business that I now own, and to know San Rafael from childhood to adulthood, and then as a business person too, and to be able to step in and have an opportunity to work with so many of you who are passionate citizens and so vested to look ahead for our city. Especially now, you know, we have sort of before COVID, and we will, as Linda said, have after. But this is the during, and I think we can make a difference now. We can make a new normal. It's sort of our prep time, and I feel strongly about that. And it's an honor to be doing that with all of you. Also, speaking of prep time, Barry and Paul and Rafi, we prepped every month before the meeting. We would meet, and I am grateful for that. I am not a city employee, and they are generous of time and expertise, and that is something that makes me better able to help chair this committee and not seem like I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. So thank you for that. And it is virtual, so I have a real glass. Sadly, it is virtual. It is empty, but I do raise my glass, and I hope that one day we can all do that together. Thank you. Rafi, let's go to you next.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'll try to keep it brief. I just want to say, when we started out with this process, we wanted a project manager that felt and acted and was part of the city. And that was our biggest striving point. And I haven't told Barry this in person, but he is amazing. Honestly, it feels like Barry's been working for the city for 20 years. He knows everything. He knows people. He's connected to the issues. He has an amazing ability to listen to 5 completely different opinions and find some kind of consensus in them. And we are where we are today because of his expertise and help in leading this project. So thank you to Barry. The other point is, I know that for some of the people who've been around on the previous general plans, this is a little different format than what was expected or what was encountered the last time, where the steering committee actually had a very hands-on, down to writing, actual sentences and so forth. And we had a different work plan this time. And that work plan was for the steering committee to serve as a sounding board. And oh boy, did it do that. And what I think we've all learned is that there is no one person or one right opinion. Everyone has a very valid perspective, and we have to test things through those perspectives. And hearing the different comments and the different opinions is what is going to make this a better plan. And so I think we are in a better place for this sort of format and for this sort of steering committee of wide-ranging opinions. And it's going to help develop the plan. So thank you to everybody, and for all your time and effort in dealing with this. And it's not done yet. We still have a lot of work, and your valued input throughout the rest of the way will get us over the finish line. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Rafi. Let's see, Barry.
Wow, I swear I didn't put this on the agenda because I wanted to hear all this praise, but I appreciate everything everyone has said. Thank you so much for the reinforcement. We should be having a party in person. Well, it would be a little premature today, but hopefully by the time this is adopted, we will have a chance to meet in person, and thank all of you for everything that you've given to this process. Big point, that's important. We're not done yet. So we're maybe having our final meeting as a group of 24, but we're going to continue to communicate with all of you individually and through a couple of follow-up committees. We have a lot of work to do. I wanted to just thank Stephanie and Omar for their leadership as our chair and vice chair. Can't express enough how fantastic you guys were to work with, and how great you've been as chair and vice chair. And also, of course, Paul and Rafi for their leadership throughout this process. I also want to acknowledge and thank the City Council, because they have the wisdom to assemble a diverse group of people who didn't all think the same. And my experience, and I've done 15 general plans at this point, gone through this process a bunch of times, there are often committees where everybody sort of kind of moves along at the same beat. And this was not that group. And after our first couple of meetings, I thought, man, how are we going to ever get through this? Because we were going like in so many different directions. So I appreciate your patience as we kind of try to listen to everybody and create a plan that reflects, if not a consensus, then certainly I think an expression of the things that we love about San Rafael. I also think that this plan, when it's done and adopted, is going to win an award, because I really feel like we're pushing the envelope on so many topic areas that nobody else in the Bay Area is tackling right now. We will be the first city in the Bay Area to have an equity, diversity, and inclusion element in our general plan. We're going to be the first city in the Bay Area to have a major focus on sea level rise in our general plan. I feel very proud of this document and proud of you guys as a committee for everything you've brought to the table. Looking forward to working with all of you as we enter the final stretch. Thanks.
And Paul. Paul on his iPad. Oh, did he just hang up on us?
No, I'm here. Wait a minute.
There you are. You turned off the video.
There we go. Yes, I'm so sorry. I don't know where to start, but what I'm going to first mention is the word passion. Jeff Jones mentioned passion. I'm a passionate person. My association with the city goes almost to 4 decades, and I worked on General Plan 2000 with 0 steering committee and 0 community involvement, and it was all staff. And this, what was nice about this is that a group of people got together with very different opinions and different topic areas and different agendas, and everyone, I think, learned and understood the difference of opinions and all these different things that go into what Rafi and I have to balance every day, which is really good. And I want to thank the committee primarily, and I want to specifically state that the City Council chose you because, like me, you have a passion for the community in whatever special way you have shown at the committee level, which I think is really, really valuable. And so thank you so much for your time on this. And for me, this is kind of my swan song. I'm going to retire after this plan is adopted. I don't plan on retiring until it's adopted, but it's really important for me to have my involvement in this process. And I'm so privileged and proud that I have been. So thank you.
I think we have to stretch it out so you hit like 5 decades.
No, I'm not that old now. Come on.
And not least at all, but last this time, because by request, Mary Beth.
Hey everyone, 30 months, 25 meetings, and we are just beginning. This is just the beginning. We brought together this passionate group of people that we're blessed to have in San Rafael with divergent views. And to be honest, we were a little nervous about it. How's this all going to work out? But under Stephanie and Omar's wonderful leadership, we put together and have pulled together the best of everyone to put into the plan that it has to go through the approval process. You know, everyone's ending. You're thinking this is ending, but it's really just beginning. We get the plan approved and then we live it. All of your hard work, which sometimes was tedious, I will admit, will live on for decades in San Rafael. I can tell you the City Council is constantly returning to the general plan for guidance as we make our decisions. So you are putting a message in the bottle for San Rafael for the next 2 decades. I cannot thank you enough for your contribution and for your belief in San Rafael to put your time in to move us forward for the next 2 decades. Our staff, Barry, you joined a great team and you lived up to the very, very high standards that they set. So Paul, by the way, no one's approving your retirement. You can't go, we need you. So that's, we're gonna keep you. Rafi, phenomenal as always, and a great job. And this plan will be something that we all spend a lot of time with over the next decades, and will carry forward the great things that San Rafael has and bring new things for our future. So thank you all.
And for your service as well. Thank you. We need like a t-shirt or something. 30 months and counting, right? I heard you were not done. And to that end, I think it's time for committee alternate comments and or public comments, any and all of which, Barry, I think you'll have to read. Or if you've answered them by chat, I'm not sure. I'm going to let you tell us how you're going to handle that.
Thank you. And yes, we have a total of 8 comments that have been submitted. I've answered a few of them, but I'm still going to make reference to them. And I may, let me just do this quickly. Pam Reeves, former committee member, thank you, Pam. It's critical that Shirley Fisher's letter be incorporated into the general plan. It's also critical that all watershed maps be included in land use maps. Judy, thank you for your compliment, and also is asking to review the implementation plan and is going to send an email with a follow-up question. That's Judy Schriedman and Pam Reeves. Judy also says, I am also concerned about where the rubber meets the road on implementation. We've seen the softer language be squashed by bean counters who only look at a single bottom line versus a triple bottom line. How much real change in the economic sphere can we rely on with our aspirational language? And then moving on to the public comments, Isabel Leiden says, since we have such a large aging community in San Rafael, has an emphasis on universal design been placed on the redevelopment of public spaces, not just to emphasizing wheelchair accessibility, but non-obstructive design to the flow and encouragement of all with different abilities, young and old people in public spaces. And I believe that those are the comments that were raised.
Thank you very much. Apologies for the limitations of the structure here. So thank you all for your patience and frankly for joining us in a virtual chat room. We have a few general business items, most of which come back from Barry on and with announcements.
And I'll be brief on these. Just a reminder that, again, we're going to the City Council on July 6th with an update on level of service and vehicle miles traveled. I also wanted to let the committee members know that we've posted a series of tutorials on form-based codes and how they work. It's a kind of daunting topic, as you may have surmised from our last meeting. And we have had Opticos prepare this series of videos. By putting them on our Neighborland site, we have created the possibility that you can type in questions or make comments that we will respond to. Can't guarantee I'll respond 5 minutes later, but we'll respond to your comments on those videos if you have specific questions, at least for the next couple of months. And I will send the URL out tomorrow to everybody as to how to view those videos. There are 6 of them, and they're roughly 10 to 12 minutes each. I think that was all I had, and I don't know if Paul or Rafi had any follow-up announcements.
Not I.
Okay. No, I didn't either, except I'm sorry, Barry. I should have mentioned you when I made my comments. I want to let everyone know we courted Barry for 1 year to get him to manage our general plan. So he's got that level of reputation in the Bay Area, and I'm so happy that he worked for us. I don't know what we could have done without him. So
thank you very much.
Opportunity to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Please forgive me. We had said that this meeting would go for 2 hours, and we have gone over that, and I do very much respect all of you and your time. That has been one of my goals, to be expeditious, but I think it was important to hear from everyone tonight. So thank you for your time and patience, and I think we'll be seeing each other, whether it's in a committee or at a council meeting, or ideally outdoors at a restaurant, or the Mayflower, or wherever we can get my champagne glass filled. So congratulations to all, and thank you for the hard work. And I am it's humbling, frankly, to be among people who care so much. So thank you.
Thank you.
And there's no next meeting to announce.
Right.
Thanks, everybody. I love the waving.
Yeah.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.